The funeral home smelled like artificial roses and disappointment. I stood there, watching my daughter-in-law Rebecca arrange and rearrange the flower displays, while my husband's body lay cold in the casket behind her. She hadn't shed a single tear since Thomas died 3 days ago. Instead, she'd been making phone calls about insurance policies and pestering the family lawyer about the will. "The lilies should be closer to the front," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of authority. "It's what Thomas would have wanted." I wanted to tell her she knew nothing about what Thomas would have wanted. In 30 years of marriage, he'd never once mentioned his flower preferences for his own funeral. But I stayed silent, clutching my granddaughter Lily's small hand as she pressed against my side. "Grandmother," Lily whispered, "why is Mommy moving everything around?" Before I could answer, my son Andrew stepped in, placing his hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Leave the flowers alone, honey. They're fine where they are." Rebecca straightened, brushing invisible dust from her black dress. "Nothing about this is fine, Andrew. Nothing." Her eyes met mine across the room, cold and calculating. "We need to discuss the estate, soon. I'm Juliana, and this is how my war began." The gathering crowd of mourners provided a welcome buffer between us. Old colleagues from the hospital where Thomas had been chief surgeon, neighbors, friends, they filled the room with murmured condolences and shared memories. I nodded mechanically, thanking them for coming, while watching Rebecca work the room like a politician at a fundraiser. Such a tragedy. Evelyn, Thomas's sister, appeared at my side. "He was too young. 58 is just..." She squeezed my hand. "Have you eaten anything today?" I shook my head, still tracking Rebecca's movements. She'd cornered Mark, her brother, near the guest book. Their heads were bent close together, voices too low to hear. "You should eat something," Evelyn insisted. "Come on, I'll..." "Did you see that?" I interrupted, watching Rebecca slip something into her purse. Something that glinted gold in the funeral home's dim lighting. She just took his pocket watch. The watch had been a graduation gift from Thomas's father, meant to be passed down to Andrew, then eventually to any sons he might have. I'd seen it on our dresser just yesterday, when I was gathering Thomas's things for the funeral home. "Are you sure?" Evelyn's voice hardened. "That little..." "Grandmother?" Lily tugged at my sleeve again. "Can I sit down? My feet hurt." I led her to a nearby chair, my mind racing. The watch was just the beginning. I could feel it in my bones. Rebecca had been pushing for details about the will since the moment Thomas's heart gave out in his sleep. Now she was taking matters into her own hands. "I'll handle it," I told Evelyn quietly. "Just keep an eye on her for me." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of faces and voices. I watched Rebecca work the room, noting how she emphasized her role as the grieving daughter-in-law to Thomas's old colleagues, the ones with influence at the hospital where Andrew was following in his father's footsteps, building allies, laying groundwork. It wasn't until everyone had gone, leaving just immediate family, that she made her move. "We need to discuss practical matters," Rebecca announced, her voice carrying across the empty room. "The house, the accounts, the practice, everything needs to be sorted quickly. For Andrew's sake, of course." "For Andrew's sake," I echoed, feeling something snap inside me. "My husband isn't even in the ground yet." "Exactly why we need to move quickly," she pressed, "before things get complicated." I looked at my son, seeing the conflict in his eyes as he stood between us, literally and figuratively. Then I looked at Lily, innocent and exhausted in her black dress, and made a decision. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice steady. "We'll discuss everything tomorrow." Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Perfect. I'll have Mark bring the paperwork." As I watched her lead my son and granddaughter away, I felt the weight of Thomas's absence like a physical blow. But beneath the grief, something else was taking root, something cold and sharp and certain. Rebecca had no idea what she'd just started. The lawyer's office felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the crowd, Rebecca, Andrew, Mark hovering by the window, Evelyn perched nervously in the corner. Or maybe it was just that Thomas's absence made everything feel wrong. "Before we begin," Rebecca said, spreading papers across the mahogany desk, "I have some concerns about the estate's management." I caught the slight tremor in her voice, excitement poorly disguised as concern. She'd been waiting for this moment, probably rehearsing it since the funeral yesterday. "The will is quite clear," the lawyer, an old friend of Thomas's, replied. "Mrs. Crawford maintains primary control of all assets, with provisions for young Lily's education trust." Rebecca's fingers tightened on the papers. "But surely, given Andrew's position at the hospital—" "Mom should have control," Andrew interrupted, surprising everyone. "Dad knew what he was doing." I watched Rebecca's face flash through several emotions before settling on a practiced smile. "Of course, darling, I'm just thinking about our future, about Lily's future." "Lily's future is secure," I said quietly. Thomas made sure of that. Mark cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the medical practice. Given Andrew's involvement—" "The practice remains under Juliana's ownership," the lawyer cut in, "with Andrew maintaining his current position and partnership track." I remembered the night Thomas had made that decision. "Andrew needs to earn it," he'd said, "really earn it, not just inherit it because he's my son." Rebecca stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Andrew has worked alongside his father for years. He deserves—" "What exactly does he deserve, Rebecca?" Evelyn's voice carried a sharp edge. "To have everything handed to him on a silver platter, like that pocket watch you took." The room went still. Rebecca's hand flew to her purse. "I didn't take anything," she said, but her voice wavered. "How dare you accuse me?" "Return the watch," I said, keeping my voice level. "It belongs to Andrew when he's ready for it." Andrew looked between us, confusion clouding his features. "What watch? Dad's graduation watch?" Rebecca pulled it out slowly, gold chain dangling. "I was going to give it to you as a surprise, a memory of your father." "By stealing it," Evelyn muttered. "Enough." Andrew grabbed the watch, his face flushed. "Can we just get through this?" The lawyer continued reading through the will's provisions, but I barely heard him. I was watching Rebecca's hands, the way they kept moving, straightening papers, adjusting her jacket, twisting her wedding ring. Planning. Always planning. "There's one more thing," the lawyer said, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Thomas left this for you, Juliana." "Private instructions," he said. Rebecca's head snapped up. "Private instructions? About what?" "That would be between Thomas and his wife," Evelyn said sweetly. I tucked the envelope into my bag, feeling Rebecca's eyes boring into me. Whatever was in it, I wouldn't read it here. Not with her watching like a hawk. "If that's everything," Rebecca stood again, "we should discuss the house. Obviously, it makes sense for Andrew and me to—" "The house stays with me," I cut her off. "You have your own home." "But it's so big for just one person," she pressed. "And with Lily can visit her grandmother whenever she wants," Andrew said firmly. "The house is Mum's home." The meeting ended with Rebecca barely containing her fury. As we filed out, she grabbed Andrew's arm. "We need to talk, now." I watched them leave, Rebecca already working to undo whatever moment of loyalty Andrew had shown. Mark followed them, pausing only to give me a look that might have been apologetic. "Well, that was fun," Evelyn sighed. "Want to get a drink?" I shook my head, touching the envelope in my bag. "I need to read this." "Whatever it says," Evelyn squeezed my shoulder, "remember Thomas loved you. Don't let Rebecca make you doubt that." Alone in my car, I finally pulled out the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Thomas's familiar scrawl. The first line made my heart stop. "My darling, if you're reading this, Rebecca has already started moving against you. Here's what you need to know." I looked up to see Rebecca watching me from across the parking lot, her face unreadable behind designer sunglasses. She raised her hand in what might have been a wave or a warning. Game on, I thought, turning back to Thomas's letter. Game on. I followed Rebecca's silver Mercedes from a safe distance, Thomas's letter burning a hole in my purse. 3 days of watching had finally paid off. She was meeting Mark again, but not at their usual coffee shop. This time, they'd chosen the old boathouse by the lake, where Thomas and I used to take Andrew fishing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I parked behind a cluster of trees and watched them through my binoculars. Rebecca paced the dock while Mark sat on a bench, his laptop open. Their voices carried across the water. "It has to be ironclad," Rebecca was saying. "That bitch thinks she's so clever with her grieving widow act." "The will's pretty solid," Mark replied, "but there might be a way around it if we can prove Thomas wasn't of sound mind when he made the changes." My hands tightened on the binoculars. Thomas had warned me about this in his letter, how Rebecca had been pushing him to revise the will months before his death, how she'd brought up his confusion at work, planting seeds of doubt. "What about Andrew?" Mark asked. "He's not exactly helping our cause." Rebecca's laugh was sharp. "Andrew will do what I tell him. He always does." A twig snapped behind me. I spun around to find Evelyn, her face grim. "Thought I might find you here," she whispered, crouching beside me. "What are our favorite conspirators up to?" I handed her the binoculars. "Plotting to declare Thomas mentally incompetent when he wrote the will." "That won't work," Evelyn said. "I was there when he updated it. So was his doctor." "They don't know that." We watched as Rebecca took the laptop, scrolling through whatever Mark had prepared. Her voice drifted over again. "Perfect. This will destroy her. You know what Thomas told me about her?" Evelyn handed back the binoculars. "Right before the wedding, he said Andrew was marrying his own funeral. I didn't understand then." A car door slammed nearby. We both froze as Andrew emerged from his BMW, heading toward the boathouse. "Shit," Evelyn breathed. "Did they plan this?" Rebecca's face lit up at the sight of her husband. "Darling, I was just discussing the practice with Mark. Those insurance issues you mentioned." Andrew looked confused. "What insurance issues?" "The ones your mother's been ignoring," Rebecca said smoothly. "Show him, Mark." I'd seen enough. I stepped out from behind the trees, Evelyn right behind me. "Hello, everyone," I called out. "Lovely day for a family meeting." The colour drained from Rebecca's face. Mark snapped the laptop shut. "Mum?" Andrew looked between us all. "What's going on?" "Yes, Rebecca." I moved closer. "What is going on? Something about insurance issues I'm ignoring." "We're trying to protect the practice." Rebecca recovered quickly. "Since you clearly don't understand the business side. Like you didn't understand that stealing Thomas's watch was wrong." "That again?" Rebecca rolled her eyes. "I returned it, didn't I?" "After you were caught," Evelyn muttered. Andrew's face hardened. "You told me you asked Mom for the watch. Does it matter?" Rebecca touched his arm. "We're family. Family shares things." "Family doesn't conspire to declare other family members mentally incompetent," I said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Andrew turned to Rebecca, something shifting in his expression. "Is that what this is about?" he asked. "The will?" "She's twisted everything," Rebecca said quickly. "She's trying to turn you against me, can't you see that?" "The only thing I see," Andrew replied, "is my wife meeting secretly with her brother to discuss my father's mental state." Mark stood up. "We should all calm down." "Show him the laptop," I suggested. "Show him exactly what you're planning." Rebecca clutched the computer to her chest. "This is private business matters." "Nothing about this is private anymore," I cut in, pulling out my phone. "Just like your conversation isn't private. Amazing what modern phones can record from a distance." Rebecca's face went from white to red. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." Andrew looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since Thomas died. "Play it," he said softly. Rebecca's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "Andrew, please." But he was already walking away, heading toward my car. Rebecca watched him go, her carefully constructed world starting to crack. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. I thought of Thomas's letter, of all the evidence he'd gathered, of everything he'd known and planned for. "You're right," I replied. "It's just beginning." The box of Thomas's personal items sat unopened in my study for a week after the confrontation at the boathouse. Each time I reached for it, something held me back. But tonight was different. Tonight, I needed answers. Inside, beneath medical journals and old photographs, I found a leather-bound diary. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. Rebecca came by the office again today. She brought up power of attorney, just like you warned me she would, Jules. My hands trembled. I'd never warned him about anything. The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the window, I saw Lily standing on the porch, clutching her backpack. No sign of Rebecca or Andrew. I opened the door. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" "Mommy and Daddy are fighting," she said, her voice small. "Can I stay with you?" I ushered her inside, noting the time, nearly 9. No call, no text. Just my 8-year-old granddaughter showing up alone in the dark. "Did you walk here by yourself?" Lily nodded. "Mommy said mean things about you. Daddy got really mad." My phone buzzed, Andrew calling. I let it go to voicemail, focusing on getting Lily settled with hot chocolate and cookies. Only then did I listen to his message. "Mom, is Lily there? Rebecca's... She's not herself. She found something in Dad's old files and she's saying things. Just call me back, okay?" I looked at the diary in my hands, then at Lily, who was carefully arranging marshmallows in her cocoa. "Grandmother," she asked suddenly, "why did Mummy say you're trying to steal everything?" Before I could answer, the front door burst open. Rebecca stormed in, Andrew close behind. "Get your things, Lily," Rebecca snapped. "We're leaving." "She's not going anywhere," I said, stepping between them. "Not until you explain why my granddaughter was wandering the streets alone at night. Because you've poisoned my husband against me." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Because you and Thomas plotted behind my back for years." She thrust a paper at me. A letter in Thomas's handwriting, dated months before his death. My blood ran cold as I read it. "You were investigating me," Rebecca laughed bitterly, "having me followed, taking pictures of my meetings." Andrew looked lost. "Mum, what is she talking about?" "Show them the diary," Rebecca demanded. "Show them how long you've been planning this." I glanced at Lily, who had shrunk into the couch cushions. "Not here, not in front of her." "Why not? She should know what kind of grandmother she has. One who spies on her family, who..." "Enough!" Andrew's voice cut through the room. "Lily, go upstairs to your old playroom, now." Once Lily was gone, Rebecca rounded on me again. "Did you enjoy it? Watching me, gathering evidence, playing the grieving widow while you plotted?" "I didn't know," I said quietly, holding up Thomas's diary. "I just found this tonight. He never told me what he was doing." "Liar." "It's true," I opened the diary. "He was protecting us, all of us, from you." Andrew took the diary, reading silently. His face grew harder with each page. "The power of attorney requests," he said finally. "The suggestions about Dad's mental state. You were planning this before he died." Rebecca's composure cracked. "I was protecting our future. He was going to leave everything to her, and that child. That child is our daughter. And what about us? What about everything we've worked for?" I watched them argue, seeing the threads of their marriage unraveling. Thomas had seen this coming, had documented everything, had left me the weapons to fight back without even telling me. "I want a divorce," Andrew said suddenly. Rebecca went still. "You don't mean that." "I'll be staying at Mum's tonight with Lily." "You can't." "I can, and I will." He turned to me. "There's more, isn't there? In Dad's records." I nodded slowly, thinking of the sealed envelope from the lawyer, still unread. "There's more." Rebecca grabbed her purse, hands shaking. "This isn't over, any of it." As she stormed out, I heard Lily's small voice from the stairs. "Is Mommy going away?" I looked at Andrew, saw the pain and resolve in his face, and realized that winning this war might cost us more than we'd imagined. But we were past the point of no return. The hospital corridor felt endless as I made my way to Andrew's office. 2 weeks since he'd moved in with me, and Rebecca had been busy. 3 board members had already called, expressing concerns about Andrew's stability and commitment to the practice. I found him at his desk, staring at a pile of resignation letters from key staff members. She got to them, he said without looking up. Convinced them I'm unstable, just like she tried to do with Dad. We'll hire new staff. It's not that simple. He finally met my eyes. She's telling everyone I had a breakdown, that I'm unfit to practice, that you manipulated me into leaving her. The sealed envelope from Thomas's lawyer sat heavy in my purse. I'd been waiting for the right moment, but maybe there wasn't one. There's something you need to see. Before I could reach for it, Evelyn burst in. Rebecca's downstairs, with lawyers. Andrew stood. What lawyers? Hospital board lawyers and... Evelyn hesitated. She's got medical records. Thomas's medical records. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. Those were sealed. Mark works in records, Andrew said quietly. Has for 15 years. The pieces clicked together. All those times Rebecca had mentioned Thomas's confusion, her hints about his judgment. She'd been laying groundwork for months, maybe years. She's claiming Thomas was showing early signs of dementia when he changed the will, Evelyn said. She's got testimonies from nurses, orderlies. All lies, I snapped. Doesn't matter. The board's spooked. They're talking about launching an investigation into all of Thomas's later decisions, including Andrew's partnership track. Andrew's face went pale. She'd destroy Dad's reputation just to win, I finished. Yes, she would. The intercom crackled. Dr. Crawford, please report to the boardroom. Andrew straightened his coat. I have to go. We'll come with you. No. He touched my arm. Mum, whatever's in that envelope, I need you to wait. If Rebecca's really doing this, we need to be careful, strategic. Like she's being strategic, Evelyn demanded. While she tears apart everything Thomas built. A text lit up my phone. A photo of Lily at school, looking lost. Below it, Rebecca's message. She misses her mother. How much more are you willing to take from her? My fingers tightened on the envelope. Inside was everything we needed. Proof of Rebecca's manipulations, her threats against Thomas, her attempts to access accounts before his death. But using it meant destroying any chance of peace, of keeping this family together. Go, I told Andrew. Handle the board. I'll deal with Rebecca. Mom, trust me. He left, shoulders squared against whatever waited in that boardroom. Evelyn watched him go, then turned to me. You're not really going to let Rebecca win, are you? I pulled out my phone, typing a response to Rebecca's threat. Meet me, alone, 1 hour. What are you doing? Evelyn asked. Giving her what she wants. I headed for the door. A chance to destroy herself. Juliana, wait. But I was already moving. Thomas's voice from his diary echoing in my head. Rebecca's greatest weakness isn't her greed. It's her certainty that she's smarter than everyone else. My phone buzzed with her reply. The chapel. Don't bring anyone. I touched the envelope one last time, feeling its weight. Inside was enough evidence to ruin Rebecca completely. Not just her reputation, but her freedom. Thomas had documented everything, had built a case so solid it would crush her, but he'd never used it. Now I understood why. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about choosing what kind of victory we could live with. Where are you going? Evelyn called after me. To finish what Thomas started, I answered, not looking back. Just not the way Rebecca expects. Behind me, I heard Evelyn's sharp intake of breath. She knew that tone. It was the same one Thomas used when he'd made an impossible decision in surgery. The one that meant everything was about to change. One way or another, this ended today. The hospital chapel stood empty, except for Rebecca, her silhouette sharp against stained glass. She didn't turn when I entered, just kept staring at the altar where Thomas and I had renewed our vows on our 25th anniversary. You know what's funny, she said. Thomas never liked me, not once in all these years, but he respected me. Respected you enough to document every threat you made. Now she turned, smile razor thin. Is that what's in your precious envelope? More of his paranoid notes? Board meetings happening right now, I said. How long before they realized those medical records were altered? Long enough. She stepped closer. Mark's very good at his job, and there are enough real questions about Thomas's final months to make everything else believable. A noise at the door made us both turn. Andrew stood there, face ashen. The board voted. I'm suspended pending investigation. Rebecca's triumph flickered. Andrew, I tried to warn you. They're investigating Dad's cases too. Every surgery, every decision from the past year. His voice cracked. They're exhuming his body. The world tilted. They can, Rebecca cut in. Given the evidence of cognitive decline, they have to rule out medical negligence. Standard procedure. I lunged for her, but Andrew caught my arm. Mom, don't... How dare you, I snarled. How dare you desecrate his memory? I tried to be reasonable, Rebecca said. Offered to split everything 50-50. But you and Thomas, you just had to prove you were better than me. Smarter, more worthy. She pulled out her phone. Now I have to use this. The video showed Thomas in his office, looking exhausted, confused. The timestamp showed 3 days before his death. Heavily edited, I said. The board will see through. Will they? When the toxicology report shows unusual levels of medication in his system? When they find out his own wife had access to his prescriptions? The implication hit like a physical blow. Andrew's grip on my arm tightened. You wouldn't, he whispered. Watch me. Rebecca's mask finally cracked, showing the desperation beneath. I'm not leaving here with nothing. Either we renegotiate everything, the will, the practice, all of it, or I destroy what's left of Thomas's legacy, and you'll go down with it. I reached for the envelope, but Andrew stopped me. There's more, he said. Tell her the rest. Rebecca's smile widened. Lily's school called. She had a breakdown in class, talking about how her grandmother killed her grandfather. Of course, I had to file a report with child services for her protection. The chapel spun around me. You used our granddaughter. I used everything I had, just like you would, just like Thomas did. She held out her hand. The envelope, now. My fingers trembled on the sealed paper. Everything Thomas had gathered, every piece of evidence that could destroy Rebecca, worthless now. Using it would only prove her claims about revenge and instability. Mum, Andrew's voice was gentle. We have to protect Lily. Rebecca's victory was complete, and she knew it. I'll have the lawyers draw up new papers. You'll sign over control of the practice, agree to a full inheritance split, and write a statement supporting my version of events. In return, I'll make sure the board's investigation ends quietly. No exhumation, no charges. Lily stays with both parents. And if I refuse, then I burn it all down, starting with Thomas's reputation. I thought of my granddaughter, scared and confused, of Thomas's body being dug up, his final rest disturbed, of Andrew losing everything he'd worked for. Slowly, I held out the envelope. Rebecca snatched it, tearing it open. Her face changed as she read, triumph turning to confusion, then fear. This isn't... No, I said quietly. It isn't. The chapel doors opened again. Evelyn entered, followed by 2 police officers and a man in a suit. Rebecca Crawford. The suit flashed a badge. FBI. We'd like to discuss some irregularities in the hospital's financial records and these edited medical files. Rebecca turned to run, but Andrew blocked her path. As the officers moved in, I finally understood Thomas's last gift. The real evidence had never been in that envelope. It had already been sent where it needed to go, months ago, waiting like a time bomb for this exact moment. But watching them lead Rebecca away, I felt no triumph, only a bone-deep exhaustion, and the weight of knowing that some victories come at too high a price. The war was over. Now we had to live with the wreckage. The visiting room at the detention center smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Rebecca sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against her pale skin. looking somehow smaller without her designer clothes and calculated smile. "Evelyn wants to testify against you," I said, "about the conversation she overheard between you and Mark 6 months ago." Rebecca's fingers twitched on the metal table. "Why are you here, Juliana?" "Because Thomas left one more letter. For you." Her mask slipped, just for a moment. "More evidence?" "No." I pulled out the envelope. "Something else. Something Evelyn told me about last night." "Evelyn?" Rebecca's laugh was brittle. "What could she possibly? She told me about the baby you lost. Before Lily. The one Thomas helped you through when Andrew was away at a conference." The colour drained from Rebecca's face. "He promised never to. He kept that promise. But Evelyn knew. She was there that night, at the hospital." Rebecca's hands began to shake. "That has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with this." I slid the envelope across the table. "Read it." She opened it slowly, as if it might bite. Her eyes moved across the page, and I watched the careful walls she'd built begin to crumble. "He knew," she whispered, "about the panic attacks, the nightmares, about how I couldn't bear the thought of losing everything again. He tried to help you. By leaving everything to you?" Her voice cracked. "By making me feel worthless. By making sure you'd never have to depend on anyone else's approval again." I pulled out a second envelope. "This is the real will, Rebecca, the one he actually filed." She snatched it, reading frantically, then read it again. "Half," she said. "He left me half of everything, independently from Andrew." "Why?" "Because he saw what I didn't. That this was never about money. It was about control. About never feeling helpless again." Rebecca's carefully constructed world was shattering, and I could see the truth finally breaking through. "The FBI investigation," she said, "the evidence, it wasn't about exposing me, was it? It was about stopping you before you destroyed yourself, and our family. But you hated me, you wanted revenge. I did. Until I read his letter. Until I understood what he was trying to tell me." I leaned forward. "We're more alike than either of us wanted to admit, Rebecca. Both willing to burn everything down to protect what we love." She stared at the will, at Thomas's signature. "Why didn't he tell me? Would you have believed him? Or would you have seen it as another way someone was trying to control you?" A tear splashed onto the paper, then another. "Lily asks about you," I said quietly. "Every day. I used her." Rebecca's voice was barely audible. "My own daughter. I became everything I was afraid of." "Yes, you did." I stood. "The FBI has enough to put you away for years. But with Thomas's letter, Evelyn's testimony about your state of mind, and my statement about the circumstances, there might be another way." Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Why would you help me? After everything?" "Because Thomas was right. Revenge doesn't heal anything. It just passes the pain along." I gathered the papers. "Think about what you want, Rebecca. Really want. Not just what you're afraid of losing. And if I choose wrong again, then you'll lose everything anyway. But this time, it'll be your choice, not someone else's." I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "I did love him, you know. Thomas. He was more of a father to me than my own ever was. I know." I looked back. "That's why he never gave up on you, even at the end." The guard appeared to escort me out. As I reached the door, Rebecca called out one last time. "Juliana, tell Lily, tell her I'm sorry, and that I'll try to be better." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Walking away, I felt the weight of Thomas's final lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't protecting someone from their mistakes, but giving them the chance to learn from them. The war was over. Now came the harder part, learning to live in peace. The garden bloomed exactly as Thomas had planned it, each flower timed to open in perfect succession. He'd always said gardens were like families. They needed both roots and room to grow. I sat on the bench, watching Lily help Andrew plant new bulbs. Her small hands patted the earth with careful precision, just like her father, just like Thomas. Will they bloom by the time Mommy comes home? She asked. Andrew glanced at me before answering. Yes, these ones bloom in spring, right when Mom finishes her program. The rehabilitation center had been Rebecca's choice, surprising us all. 6 months of intensive therapy instead of prison time. She'd signed the plea deal without hesitation. Grandmother? Lily held up a bulb. Can we plant some by Grandfather's stone? Of course, sweetheart. As they gathered their gardening tools, Evelyn appeared with a familiar box. Thomas's personal effects from his office. Found something you should see, she said, sitting beside me. She pulled out a small notebook, its pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. His last case notes. I opened it carefully. Among medical terminology and surgical plans, I found something else. Observations about Rebecca, spanning years. Notes about her anxiety attacks, her fierce protection of Lily, her fear of abandonment. He was treating her all along, Evelyn said softly, in his own way. Without her knowing. I touched the worn pages. Without any of us knowing. There's more. She hesitated. The night he died, he'd just finished writing a letter to Rebecca's father. My head snapped up. What? Confronting him about the abuse, the abandonment, everything that made Rebecca who she is. Evelyn's voice caught. He was fighting for her, Jules. Right until the end. Lily's laughter drifted across the garden as Andrew showed her how to measure the planting depth. The sound hit me like a physical thing. Joy and pain tangled together. I found this too, Evelyn said, handing me an envelope. It was tucked inside his surgical journal. The paper was thick, expensive. My name in Thomas's handwriting. Read it, Evelyn urged. It's time. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Jules, if you're reading this, then everything has played out as I feared it might. Rebecca's demons finally overwhelmed her, and you've had to face the storm I saw coming. I know you'll want revenge. It's one of the things I've always loved about you. Your fierce protection of our family. But remember what I taught Andrew in his first surgery. Sometimes healing requires cutting away the damaged parts, but it always requires giving new growth a chance. Rebecca is damaged, but she's family. The choice of how to handle that will define not just her future, but yours, and Lily's. I've left you everything you need to destroy Rebecca completely. I've also left you everything you need to help her heal. The choice of which path to take is yours. But know this, true legacy isn't in what we leave behind, but in what grows from the seeds we plant. All my love, Thomas. I looked up to see Lily placing a flower on Thomas's memorial stone, Andrew's hand on her shoulder. Beyond them, the garden stretched out in careful patterns, each plant supporting the others, creating something greater than its parts. He knew, I said. All along, he knew this would happen. Of course he did, Evelyn smiled. He was Thomas. My phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca's counselor. Her latest evaluation showed significant progress. She was asking if I would consider joint therapy sessions. 6 months ago, I would have deleted the message. 3 months ago, I would have used it as leverage. Now, Lily, I called out, come help me choose which bulbs to plant next. Your mother always loved blue flowers. As my granddaughter ran over, dirt smudged and beaming, I finally understood Thomas's last lesson. Revenge might satisfy our pain, but only forgiveness allows us to grow beyond it. I texted back a single word, yes. In the garden, new life pushed through old earth, reaching for the light, just like Thomas had planned, just like he'd taught us all to do.